What if I told you that we could be building a competitively viable meta deck for under $100? And that includes staples and extra deck. So even if you're starting from scratch, you can build this for almost nothing. And if you have those cards, this deck would be even less. So let me show you guys what I'm talking about. Okay, so before I explain what the deck is, I want to give you guys some tools. You can do some of this deck building for yourself, and you understand my thought process, how I reached my decision here on what deck is a strong budget option for this format. So we have to look at the meta, and here we have Pack second place deck, and then I also got my first place UDS deck here. And these two decks are some of the staples of the format, the templates that we should be expecting to see, stuff similar to this. Now, obviously, we may not see everything that is exactly like this constantly, but most decks we should expect to be in this sort of fashion. And we want to look at these decks and notice what made them do well in terms of their non-engine, and then how are we able to beat that? Because for our rogue decks to work, we have several different options. We're not going to be playing with the strongest engine, and that should be a given. Our engine will not be as good as the tier 0 or tier 1 deck. We have to make sure that it has good matchups, though, into the hand traps or the board breakers or whatever non-engine is being used in the format, and then it could also play the non-engine that is needed in the format to beat this tier 1 deck. So what I'm getting at here is, if you look at between the decks, there's a large emphasis placed on hand traps. Both of our decks played a lot. Pack played even more than myself. And then you're siding into more copies so that post side, you really have an abundance of hand traps. And when you do the math on it, it's to ensure that you have a high chance of drawing multiple when you go second against the fire decks. So once we understand that, we know the way we want to beat combating these fire decks as we're playing a rogue deck is to have a deck with a high enough hand trap count that we can consistently draw multiples going second. We also want to make sure that we're not too weak to hand traps, because if everyone in the format is playing hand traps in expectation for Fire Kings, or I mean for Snake Eye, then we want to make sure we don't succumb to the same weaknesses, right? Because if our deck is going to lose the same cards the Fire King deck does or the Snake Eye deck does, then what's the point of playing it? Now, obviously, the point would be to save money, but we want to find something that could fit both of those requirements. And now the other thing we want to be looking for is if it can play well into the tier 1 engine. And now that one is probably a bit harder, especially when you're playing in what seems to be a tier 0 format. Usually a deck is stronger with negation or stronger with destruction in terms of interrupts. The fire deck is really strong because it is both. Between IP, SP, and Princess, you have destruction, and then you also have negation through Appaloosa, through Arvada, and through Baron Savage. You unfortunately are being attacked on all fronts here, and I think the only way to be strong with a strong enough engine into this is to power through it, and that's ultimately impossible. So I think as we approach our deck building question of how do we build, what deck do we build for a budget option that is going to pair well into this, we're going to ignore what plays well into the fire engine, because I think the answer is nothing. Even fire cannot play well into fire. That's why you rely on the hand traps. So what we're looking for then is a deck that is not weak to hand traps, but also can play a bunch of hand traps. And then we also want to make sure it can be played relatively cheap. And so that adds a third criteria in as we're looking at things to play. And if we want to keep the deck $100, that almost immediately cancels out the wanted cards, bonfires. More importantly, it means Little Knight is a card we can't include in the deck. And that doesn't mean it's a death sentence for everything. A lot of decks can function just fine at Little Knight, and some decks would choose not to play it, either just because of restrictions in summoning. But that's fine. It just means that's not going to be an option for us, no Little Knight. If we can find something that doesn't have to use Little Knight, doesn't have to play any other expensive staples, no Princess either, then that's the route we're going to be taking. So what did I have in mind for you guys? And the deck I'm talking about is Marincess. So we can go along this whole gimmick here that water beats fire, but that's not actually what I'm going for here. It's almost just ironic that a water deck would be somewhat decently positioned. But what I like about Marincess here is if you have never played it before, it could do relatively large amount of things with just one card. In the same way the Snake Eye Ash is very good, you can do a lot with just any Marincess monster. It's not as powerful as Snake Eye Ash, but it is very good. And I think it plays into hand traps pretty well as well, because you have a bunch of Link 1s that do different things, as well as all your monsters are pretty easy to extend with. So obviously if you draw just one monster, pleasing to a hand trap will happen, but that's okay. And because it's not really a combo deck, you don't have a bunch of bricks in your deck that'll suck to draw. Some of the deck building concepts that like Pac talked about in his deck profile that he got second with, and the reason he doesn't play Fire King, is he wanted to have just all cards that are either extenders, starters, or hand traps, not have any bricks in there. And that makes sense. And this follows a similar concept where you only have a couple one-ofs you don't want to draw. And even like one of the one-ofs that isn't great, which is Mandarin, This card plays by itself still, and that's super cool. And follow-up's really good. The grind game is strong, so if you get into a grind game, it's okay. There's quite a lot. Also, you do have power with Toad. That's something that we don't have in like Master Duel or OCG. That, you know, I've played this deck in Master Duel, and that was something I've been missing. I don't play Dweller, but it's something else you can play if there's a lot of Fire King. Love the Snake Eye going around, though. I did cut it from my extra deck. So let me show you guys what the deck looks like, though. So 3 Blue Tang. What this one does is when it's summoned, you can send 1 Rincess from deck to grave. So you do have 1 graveyard effect, and that is this Mandarin here. Or you can send something you want to add back, because like all of the Rincess cards that you add back start from the grave. Your deck is very good toolbox in that way, and that's partially why it's so good at the hand traps. What it also does, though, is when you link with it, or it just goes to the grave. I think it's just when you link with it, though. Essentially, yeah, send to the grave for a link with a water monster. You get to excavate the top 3 cards, and then add a Rincess card that's excavated to your hand. So this is really good. It's a foolish and add back. Obviously, the Alien list is terrible because it gets 2 effects. And one of the best cards with your hand traps, this card alone is just very strong. Anything that's good, it's going to be good at the hand trap, something with a field and a graveyard effect. And those are very rare where you find a card with both playable effects. This is one of the rare ones, and it's nuts. The Spring Girl, you can also play with just by itself, which is the whole kind of theme of the deck. But if you draw in conjunction with other ones, it's really good. So these level 4 waters, these set up Toad plays or Kraken plays. And what this one does is banish Marincess from the grave to summon it. So it's like Aqua Spirit, keeping in the Cybers theme, keeping in the Marincess theme. So you can add it off this, or add back on any of your Link monsters. And then also the effect that when it goes to grave, you can mill 2, and I think if you mill Marincess, it burns 200. That effect is whatever. Yeah, you mill 2, and then... Or, sorry, no, it doesn't mill 2. It mills 1 for every Marincess you control. Okay, it shows how much I remember. And then it burns 200 from real Marincess. I honestly try not to use this effect, because if you mill one of your searchable one-ofs, you can be poopy. You want to wait till the end to use it, and the burn effect never matters. Which is why I honestly forgot there. Yeah, just don't overuse this, because really the 200... It's 200 damage, like who cares? At the risk of ruining your combo, it's not worth it. Pascal is here, which is like your Marauding Captain, a special summon from hand. And again, level 4. So this is the last level 4. You're not guaranteed to have a rank 4 play in this deck. When you see multiple Princess cards, it's very easy to get to level 4s, though. And then when you do, you can make your field better, which is nice because you have the standard board when it happens with 1 card, and then you can have other options for when you draw extenders and such. Also, is the other effect that when it's in the grave, and except the turn it was sent there, you can manage it to add back a Princess Spiral Trap. And this is part of why the deck's grind game is so good. This is not even a huge part of it, but you get to add back Dive, which we'll get to later, which is really strong. Or Battle Ocean in some cases, but usually it's just Dive. I like to add. It's not terrible to add back, but yeah. Dive, just kill them. Seahorse, one of the old ones. If you control a Princess monster, like a Link, you can special summon it to the zone it points to. This one's not level 4, though, which is a little bit of a nuisance. And then even more for follow-up, just like the other one, is you can banish it from the grave, except the turn it's sent there. And then you can special summon Princess from your hand to another zone Link points to. Yeah, just more ways to push through your turn 2. A huge appeal to this deck is how powerful it is after the first turn. And then your last monster is Mandarin. So what this one does is when you have 2 Princess Link monsters in the field, you can summon it to a zone that 1 points to from the graveyard. So this is like the only actual graveyard extender you'd get off of Blue Tang. However, because you're adding back so much, Blue Tang dumping a card you want to add back is usually what you do. It's just when you have hands full of Princess cards. This one's pretty good. Okay. And then even if you just draw this by itself, it still does stuff. So it's okay. And then... So this is like one of the only one-ofs in the deck. The other 3 Princess cards that are one-ofs are these. So Battle Ocean is your field spell here. And it's one of those effects not once per turn. And it says when you link summon a Marincess, you can... Oh, sorry, all Marincess gain 200 attack. And also they gain 600 attack for each Marincess equipped to it. But yeah, and then monsters you control a link summon using Crystal Heart as material unaffected by opponent's card effects. I think that effect sucks because they'll just kill this and then that doesn't matter. So I don't play Crystal Heart, which is important to note. But when you link summon a Marincess monster, yeah, this is the effect that's actually good. The true extra monster zone, you can target 3 Marincesses in your grave and then put them as equip spells. One of the Marincess, when it goes to the grave, will add back from the grave. So you'll get that effect every time you link summon with it. And then it also gives you bonus effects, which you'll see when we get to the extra deck monsters. You also get a bonus effect with Dive here. Dive is monster reborn from Princess. However, if you control Battle Ocean, it's teleport instead as summons from the deck. So yeah, it's searchable, so you don't need to play multiple. And I'm not playing Desires. Yeah, one is fine. And then Wave. So Wave is like Imperm here, but if you control Princess Link that's 2 or higher, active from hand. And then also, if it's Link 3 or higher, the Princess you control, maybe butchering these. No, if it's Link 3 or higher, you can use it from hand. It's Link 2 or higher, what it does is all your monsters in the field become unaffected by your opponent's card effects the rest of the turn. So you get a really strong monster and make it immune to effects, and then you stay alive, and then because your follow-up is so good, that's how you overwhelm them and kill them on the next turn. And it's still Disruption. Imperm effects are really good right now, as we can see from all the winning deck lists. So another Imperm effect, this is pretty good. And this card is searchable again, so she's probably one-ofs. So yeah, that's why it's like ideal here, right? You have so few one-ofs, your deck is really packed full of either your actual playable cards, and then full of your non-engine that's really powerful. You really don't have bad draws at all. Your deck should flow really smoothly. And when you're trading hand traps and you want every card in your hand to be live, it's exactly what you're looking for, even if the plays aren't really flashy. And then for the spells, it's pretty simple. I'm not sure about these ratios. I wanted to fit as much non-engine as possible, which is why there's only 1 cent on mining. It's a card you could play more of, especially as it just got reprinted. It's even cheaper now in the OTS pack. But I didn't want to put too many monsters in the deck because that's not the huge theme. Obviously, you need monsters to push through hand traps. It's just that, for one, this is bad card economy. Discarding a card, obviously, when you shouldn't be having dead cards in hand. And the deck should already be pretty consistent. But you can mess around with more of these. Prosperity weak to draw as well. I guess so is mining, which is something to note. But I felt like it was good enough. This also just doesn't have to get a monster. Like if you have hands full of monsters, it gets a hand trap. Yeah. Banishing extra deck can be a little rough in this deck. So yeah, that's another issue with Prosperity. But I've still liked this card. Going for 6 is hard. Going 3 is pretty easy. You could be aggressive with it as well. It's just, yeah, I don't know. Just things to think about. Also to note, one other extender you could be playing in this deck that I am not right now is Sleepy Maiden. So what this one does is, if it's in your hand, you can target a monster you control, Marissa's monster and special summon it, and then while it's on the field, that monster can't be destroyed. And then has some graveyard effect to equip a Marissa from the grave to a Marissa you control. But while it's an extender to help you push through stuff, it's level 5, so it means that drawing it by itself, this does nothing. It can only contribute to some of the worst hands, so I replaced it with more non-engine. You can do as you see fit in terms of this card. And then, yeah, so if you're counting here, this is 20 cards. Your engine cards here, and then you have 20 non-engines. This is even better than the Snake Eye decks, and your likelihood of drawing non-engine is so high in this deck. It's better than in really any other deck, and that's why it's actually really solid. So I'm playing Bell, 3 Bell right now, 3 Droll, 3 Nibiru, 3 Ash, 3 Veiler, 3 Imperm, and 2 Mourners. So Mourner and Bell are the ones I'm not sure about. When I played the Fire King decks, the hand traps is settled on being the best for these 15. But you do have 5 more spots in this deck. I know that Pack and Christian Urena liked Mourner a lot. I wasn't sold on it, but I'm open to testing it. And I put Bell in instead as my one that I played 3 of because it stops Princess and Grave when you need it on your own turn. If Princess and that's it is your only interruption because you've hand trapped them a bunch, it's something you can prosp into to help play. Or if you just hold it, I think that's pretty solid. And this still hits a bunch of stuff in the deck. So yeah, I don't know. Like I think this was fine. But these are the things you have to mess around with. You can also try DD Crow. It's another hand trap. And Ghost Turger on Appaloosa and Island could be okay, but again, I think those are better and more board breaker strategy, and I don't think this really fits the bill. Bell, I typically want to use as a board breaker card too, but like it's okay against like Princess. I don't love it. Yeah, that's where I'm indecisive. But the reason why you play 20 hand traps here is with this ratio, you should have about 97% chance to draw 1 in 5 cards. You should have, I think, about 80% to draw. Is it 80%? I have to do the math again. But it should be a very high number to draw 2. And the reason why is to draw 3 hand traps, your odds are 50%. Exactly 50. So that doesn't sound brilliant, but to get a 50% hand traps ratio for 3 or plus, 3 or more, is so hard. It's actually just so hard. And this deck can do that, which I think is super cool. It's something we aim to do almost when we go second, like post side in the Fire King or Snake Eye deck, because that's how you can confidently win the mirror match. But you can't do that because you have to find space for your bricks, like Flamebird, Oak, Sinful Spoils, cards you don't want to draw, and you have to fit that all in with starters. This deck doesn't have as much of that problem, and I think that's a big selling point of the deck. As for the extra deck, there's no SP in here, obviously, and that's partially why it is cheap. The 2 blue slugs here, so what this one does is link 1, you add back Princess from the grave, super cool. I think that's all it does. You only link someone 1 a turn, and then this is going to lock you into waters. So this is a big reason why you aren't playing non-water cards in your extra deck. Your extra deck will be 15 water cards. And there's a cool combo with these Waterlock cards and Zelantis, because what Zelantis says is that you summon back the monsters. So if you're waterlocked and you banish their field, their monsters will just stay banished, because if they're not water, which is insane. It turns this into like access code talker almost. Moving on, Sea Angels, your other link 1. This is partially why this deck is really good into hand traps. Multiple link 1s is obviously nuts. Now they do require level 4 lower ones. You can't use these for each other. That's fine. And what this one does is it adds the Marissa spell from deck to hand. So it can add Wave or Battle Ocean. Not Wave, Dive. Yeah. So your link 1s. And then your link 2 here, Coral Enemy, is also broken because, like Blue Tang, this has 2 effects, 1 in field, 1 in grave. So if it gets Veilered, you still like fine because it goes positive. This card is just broken. So what it does is it revives a water from the grave with 1500 less attack, which is still most cards. And then it summons the zone of points to it, and it locks you into waters, and again, doesn't matter. And when it goes to grave, that you add back Marissa's card from graveyard to hand. So when you equip it via Battle Ocean as well, that means when this card will go to the grave, so when the link monster dies, you will get to add back more follow-up, which is fantastic. And then Marbled Rock here is probably one of the less useful ones, but still good for grind games and some random stuff, which is once per turn you can target a Marissa in your grave, add it to your hand. And it does something when an opponent declares an attack, I think, right? The opponent's monster declares an attack, you can send a princess from your hand to the grave. And then the monster can't be destroyed by battle, you take no damage. Yeah, it's whatever. This card's just fine for cycling back cards with follow-up. It's also important to have Link 3s in the deck because of one of the Link 4s you'll see in a second. And I'll explain the combo. Coral Triangle, this one's really strong. So this is, again, graveyard effect and effect on field, which is so broken. Like, you're really just link climbing while getting all these bonus effects. So you can discard a Princess card to add a Princess trap from deck to hand. So this is how you're getting wave. Obviously, discarding a card means neg card economy into Impermanent Veiler, but it's not the huge deal. And its graveyard effect is great for follow-up because it can't be used to turn it sent to the grave, but when it's in your grave, you can banish it. You control no monsters to revive princesses from your grave equal to link rating 3. So usually you can bring back like an enemy plus another monster, then an enemy revives one more, and then you're really putting up like 4 bodies with 1, and then you go into your link 1s, and it should just be lethal. And you can get stuff back from your banish pile in this deck. That means you get it back as well. You can do so much with this resolving that usually it's just considered like soul charge and your opponent's dead, even if they have interrupts. Next up is Argonaut. This is a great one for disruption. So what it does is your opponent uses a spell trap, you can have one of the equips that are equipped to it. So if you have Battle Ocean, negate it and then summon the monster that's equipped to it. So just the next spell and trap negate. This is really good for branded or whatever, because it hits branded fusion, all that stuff. I'm liking it less this format because spells and traps aren't hugely important, although it does something. And then you can only attack this as well. I think that's all it does. Oh, I'm sorry, there was another effect that is very important. I'm just forgetting because it's been a while since I've played this. You can target 1 water you control, 1 card your opponent controls, return them to the hand. So yeah, this is removal, and this is important for floaters like Ambler Whale. So most of the time I do removal, I do with Atlantis, which is why this isn't like super important. Atlantis is just infinitely better removal because it banishes their field, like the entire field. You can't understate how strong that of effect that is. And the last Princess card here is Bubble Reef. So this card's actually underrated, I think, a lot of the time, and maybe that's just weird to say, and maybe Princess people don't underrate it. But when I first read these cards, I didn't think this card was that good. So it's Budget Heat Soul in the sense of during your opponent's standby phase, or is it both standby phases? I feel like it never lives that far. During each standby phase, sure. You banish a water in the grave to draw a card. So when you don't have Engine, or your only way to play was Mandarin and it had to banish itself to get to play, I'll make this instead of Argonaut because I'll get the draw. Or if you can't get to Battle Ocean, so you can't resolve Argonaut, then yeah, just the draw is good as well. But it is more than that as well, because you can discard a water from your hand to the grave, special a banished princess. So why that's important and how are you banishing princesses is with this Spring Girl here, right? So there's many combos you can do, and some of the most powerful plays are when you go Marbled Rock, and then you banish it for Spring Girl, and then you can Bubble Reef this back, and you can make both Link 4s. And that's pretty good, and then you get the draw, especially when you deck with 20 hand traps. The draws are not to be undervalued. They are very powerful. Yeah. That's Bubble Reef, very strong card. And the last 2 Link monsters here that aren't princesses are Splash Mage, because the deck is whole Cyberus. Very good for follow-up plays, specifically leaking into, not Atlantis, but into other stuff. This Atlantis is obviously really strong, as I mentioned. That's, I mean, using for removal here. It's not any combo plays. And then you got your rank 4s, because you do have level 4s here. So Bahamut Toad is one of the strongest. And now you can be Dweller over this, but I'm trying this out right now, and that is Stealth Kragan. So it makes everything on the field water, which can be cool if you have Gozen match. I'm not meaning it, but you can definitely side it for when you go first, or versus decks that Gozen's just good against. And then once per turn, it's during either turn, or during the main phase, destroy a water monster your opponent controls, and it burns them. It has another effect that summons this Spawn Kragan from extra deck, but I don't play that, so I don't even know what it does. But yeah, this is just like really good in terms of popping stuff over and over again. Like, as far as quality disruption goes, it's pretty good. It's quick effect as well, which means like if it's on summon, like they try to like, I don't know, princess it, you can chain it to at least pop a card, which is cool. Yeah, so there's no side deck built here because I haven't really gone that far yet, but you could probably keep that pretty budget. And let me show you guys how much this would cost. Okay, so let's take a look at my TCG player card here. We have 55 cards here, 55 items, and that's the 40 card main deck, 15 card extra deck, and I optimized the card here down to 13 packages. The item total is under $70. Now there's shipping, obviously, and I will count it, but either way, that brings us to a total of $85, which is crazy. And you can see I have everything here. These cards are so cheap. And now let's take it a step further. Now let's say we have all the staples here. Let me show you how much it would cost if you take out the Ash Blossoms. Let's say I remove this package because these are all staples. These are all staples as well. Let's remove this. Say I have Prosperities already. And let's say I have these ones as well. Say I have these. Is that all the staples? It's a staple as well. These are staples as well. And how much is my deck worth? Nice. So yeah, I mean, like, this deck, as far as engine goes, is so cheap. Like, you get everything for, not including shipping, for under 25 bucks. And if you are starting from scratch without staples, the whole deck is $85, and you're also getting that staple base that you can use for future as well. So I think this is absolutely worth people to look into. And obviously, like, it will not keep up with the fire decks entirely, but I think this will give you a decent chance. If you pit this against fire, you will take games off them. This will not be like a blowout like you will with other rogue decks. You can keep up, especially with the hand traps. And I do want to show you guys this deck in action. So next week or the week after, maybe, I will go to locals and I will play Marincess and record it for you guys. And yeah, that should be really interesting. I'll show you how it plays out, some of the combos. There are better resources online to look up how some of the standard plays of this deck. It is pretty linear. So if you are new to Marincess and my explanations weren't enough in figuring out how the combos work, then just look online or wait a week and you'll see how I play the deck in future weeks. Now, this deck isn't without flaw. One of the biggest weaknesses with this deck is I think Nibiru hurts it a lot. While it is very good into most hand traps, Nibiru is rough. You don't have much way to play around it, and extending past it is not the easiest thing in the world. That being said, it's not impossible, and when your hands are full of extenders, it's really good, especially when Bahamut can force it out relatively early, or sometimes Bahamut Toad before they get to the point where you can Nibiru. So yeah, if you guys like seeing content where I'm looking at budget options, let me know. I can do more of that in the future, and I'll be back hopefully with some Marincess gameplay in the future as well. Let me know what you guys think of any other decks you can build for really cheap that can keep up or even better than Marincess. Considering Rave Raptor, but given the recent price surges, that's not an option anymore. It's also pretty strong. It can also play a bunch of hand traps, but it is no longer very cheap. It's probably like north of $100 relatively easily. So yeah, and I'll see you guys all next time. Peace.
Thank you guys for watching the video. A great way to support the channel is to get the TSX1 sleeves on tsx1.com. These are the sleeves I use at every event. They are fantastic quality. They feel really great to shuffle in your hand, your deck, fanning out your grave. They slide really smoothly, and they last the entire tournament, so you're not compromising quality either. Use the code POTATO10 on the website. You'll get 10% off across everything.